welcome to the Wednesday webinars. So we have Dr. Karen Waite here to talk with us today about sportsmanship. She is the equine state specialist at Michigan State, and she has her PhD in sports psychology with a focus on equestrian activity. And today she's going to talk to us a little bit about sportsmanship within the equine industry, and she's going to share all that she has with us tonight. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Everything's working all right?
Yeah, we just can't see you, so I don't know why.
That's fine. You can see the slides though, right?
Yes, we can see the slides.
Well, it's just as well. You don't need to be able to see me. All right. Thanks for the introduction, Brittany. And just by way of a little background information, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself before we get started. Whenever someone's talking, it helps to have a little bit of information regarding their background. So if you look at the picture up here in the top left corner of the slide, that's me on what was probably my first ride. So fortunately, I don't have to be fastened to the pony anymore, but as you can see from an early age, I was very interested in good horsemanship, obviously. But then if you move around kind of clockwise, there's a picture of me on a horse in my 4-H days at our county 4-H fair. And during that phase, I learned so much about horses and about showing horses. And I had decided at that time that at some point in my life, I wanted to show horses at a pretty high level. So down here on the bottom left, you can see a picture of myself and a horse that I showed a couple of times at the Quarter Horse Congress in 2000. I also showed that mare on the Palomino circuit pretty extensively and pretty successfully. And then in the bottom right corner there is a picture of another quarter horse that I showed at a regional and national level in all-around events mainly. And now I've moved on and switched to reining horses. So I guess I need to update my slide and add another picture, but that's a new thing. So just to give you, again, a little bit of background, I grew up in the Michigan 4-H program. I'm a multi-carded judge, so when I'm not working in extension or working at Michigan State University, I'm usually judging horse shows or showing horses. I'm the past president of the American Youth Horse Council and the Michigan Quarter Horse Association. And so I guess the big question is, who really cares? Why does it matter? The main reason it matters is because I understand what it's like. I understand what it's like to be in the arena, showing horses at a variety of levels, the stress that comes with that, and I've been on both sides of it, both as an exhibitor and a judge, and I understand how sportsmanship sometimes falls by the wayside or can get tested. So I have some theories, or at least one big theory, about why it is that we sometimes have problems with sportsmanship in the horse show area. And those tie a little bit to reality shows, to be honest, because I think we can all agree that when we're in the air conditioning or it's wintertime and we all get together in a room in an educational training and talk about sportsmanship, everybody goes, yep, you just be nice. You just need to be a good human. And then when we get into the arena and it's hot and we're tired and we're competing and we have all this social comparison going on, somehow we forget everything we thought we knew about sportsmanship. So I kind of wonder sometimes if there isn't a connection between the presence of reality shows and people's interest in reality shows and what goes on in the horse show world or any competitive environment, really. So when you're in a competitive environment, there's attention seeking because somebody wants to be first, right? That's what we do when we compete. And I will tell you, I have no problem with competition. I actually enjoy competition. But there are good ways to compete and not so good ways to compete. So what we've seen in the last 10, 15, or 20 years is that we have this kind of competition, this kind of social comparison. And I think sometimes young people especially will see this on TV and see people acting crazy in these kinds of comparative environments and that kind of thing, doing things to get even more attention. And sometimes I wonder if they don't think, well, that if they do it on TV, if the Real Housewives are doing that, maybe I can do that too, or maybe I should do that too. And I would say that is not accurate. But we do know that there are lots of positive outcomes that come from showing horses, absolutely. But the potential for negative behaviors, like we might see in reality shows, depending on what horse shows you go to and the people that you interact with, is definitely present. And actually, so much so that fairly recently there was a call for 15 to 19-year-old girls to participate in a reality show based on showing horses. So let's just stop there for a moment and think about what that could look like. Now, obviously, in that kind of situation, just as with any reality show, they probably were going to escalate the drama a bit just to keep the show interesting. Sometimes you don't have to do that at horse shows. Sometimes the drama escalates all by itself. But think a little bit about that kind of idea and whether or not that would be good or bad. Now, it certainly might be negative because horse showing is absolutely a sport. Again, I don't have any problem with competition. I think there is a good way to compete and there's a right way to compete. And we're going to talk about that as we go through this talk. But it could be negative just because in our society, sometimes sports are portrayed as a form of war. So when you think about Nike ads and some of those things, it really is, from the backyard little league game and your 4-H fair all the way up to high levels of sport, we look at competition as a form of war in a lot of ways, in the words we use, in the way we describe it, and beating our opponents. And unfortunately, if you tied that to a reality show about horses, we have a tendency in reality shows to focus on behavioral extremes. So that would not necessarily be a positive. But what I like to remind young people especially is that, first of all, reality shows aren't actually real. They're scripted for entertainment purposes. They're made more dramatic than they often are or than they would be. And so that's not really what we want to behave, how we want to behave in our everyday life and in our communities. There actually, if you remember a while ago, there's a show called Dance Moms. And usually when I give this talk, I show a Dance Moms video in the very beginning. But because we're kind of pressed for time, I cut that out. But if you remember, the lady the coach from Dance Moms was just, and seemed like a very bad person, got very, very dramatic, very excited. And they actually filmed an episode of Dance Moms in Michigan. And I had some friends that went and watched the taping of that. And they said that the woman couldn't have been nicer before the cameras rolled. When the cameras rolled, she acted like she acts on the show. And when the cameras turned off, she was nice again. So remember that reality shows aren't really real, and you don't need to be acting like those people. So no, we should not be basing our behavior on this. So what if we did have a positive reality show, though? What would that look like potentially? And I think what we probably would want to say is that we could just behave this way in our everyday life at horse shows and actually think about sportsmanship while we do it. So being intentionally good, intentionally positive with our behaviors is an important part of showing horses. And in any kind of sportsmanship, it doesn't matter what sport it is, one of my favorite quotes is that good character and bad character potentially, is both taught and caught. And what I mean by that is sometimes we think, well, if kids participate in these activities, they'll get all the positive benefits. And that's not necessarily true. Sometimes we have to be very intentional about teaching them the positive things and pointing out the negative things, or they just won't know. If the adults around them behave poorly in a competitive environment, that's what they learn. If the adults around them behave positively in a competitive environment, that's what they learn. So we do, though, need to think a little bit about what good sportsmanship at a horse show would look like. Because without having that kind of definition, and this is what happens a lot, especially from a sportsmanship perspective, it means different things to different people. So sometimes when you ask people what good sportsmanship is, they'll say, well, it's what we do at the end of the baseball game where everybody goes through and shakes hands. Well, we typically don't do a lot of that at horse shows. You might see people congratulating one another if they're friends and that kind of thing. But we don't usually get in a line and shake hands because horses could not necessarily handle that. That could be very bad. That could be unsafe. So we need to think a little bit about, if we're going to be intentional about good sportsmanship at a horse show, what would that look like? So when I was working on my PhD, I had a project that included an animal science horse behavior piece, and then it also included the development of an evaluation tool for sportsmanship at horse shows. So I actually took a definition from traditional sport, like football and soccer and baseball and all those sorts of things, from a book called Coaching for Character, Reclaiming the Principles of Sportsmanship. And I modified that and adapted it for animal activity and for equine, in this case specifically. And my definition ultimately included respect for horses, because they're a critical piece of what we do at horse shows. Without horses, we don't have horse shows, obviously. So that is the first most important piece of showing good sportsmanship. So respect for our opponents, respect for the game itself, and we'll talk more about that, and then respect for the other people involved, or the others that are involved in the activity. So we'll go through each of these and talk a little bit about what that might look like in our interest in being intentional about this. But who do these things apply to? So it's not just the players in the ring or on the baseball field or the competitors in the show ring. It applies to everybody involved if you're going to create a climate and an environment where good sportsmanship is important. So that means 4-H leaders, that means family, that means spectators, and obviously that means competitors. So starting then with respect for horses, we want to make sure that we teach kids and practice, demonstrate, model good animal management. So that includes healthcare before we ever get to the horse show, having an understanding of biosecurity principles, which I know in Oklahoma you're working on pretty darn extensively. So, but having good healthcare prior to the event and during the event, good nutrition prior to the event. In order to show a horse, it needs to be in good condition. And in order for it to be in good condition, you have to start that long before you get to the horse show. And then fair training practices. And what do we mean by fair training practices? Since we only have 30 minutes, I'll go as fast as I can with this. But basically what I mean when I say that is you give the horse the opportunity to make the right choice. And when they make the right choice, you reward them or leave them alone. You don't keep asking once they've given you what it is you want. So you have to know what it is you want. You have to have timing enough to ask for it and then release when you get it. That's what I mean by fair horse training practices in a 10-second definition. We can talk more about that some other time if you like. But the long and the short of it is horses did not develop to go to the county fair and do everything you ask for them necessarily. That's not how they're designed structurally. So they absolutely deserve good treatment in exchange for all the joy they provide us. And so that's part of sportsmanship in my definition. One of the interesting things about the word competition, and I alluded earlier to the fact that we in society tend to look at it like war, but the word competition actually comes from the Latin word that means to seek or strive together. So it's not necessarily against one another, but it's seeking excellence with your opponent. So in order to have respect for our opponents, what I would challenge you to do is to think of your competitors differently. So if you're a sportsman-like exhibitor, you recognize and appreciate a well-prepared, challenging opponent who will bring out your best. And that's what I enjoy about competition. I personally don't enjoy competition where there's a clear winner and a whole lot of other people who aren't quite up to the standard. If I'm going to compete with someone, if they beat me, it's going to be because they did their best. And if I win that against them, it's going to be because I did my best. And that's what I'm getting at here. So you can appreciate that person that maybe you consider to be your competitor, because they'll make you better. And once they do make you better, or once they do bring out the best in you, or vice versa, then you want to share that appreciation with your opponents, and let them know how much you appreciate the fact that they challenge you to be better. So rather than looking at them as the enemy, or, when we go back to that war thing, looking at them like they're the enemy is the best way to put it, I guess. From a sportsmanship perspective, we also have to have respect for the game. And what I mean by that is respecting the rules. The rules are there for a reason, and this is true, and this is a problem in society. And so horse shows are just a small piece or a small window into society as a whole. But understanding, respecting, and following the rules, always trying your best, recognizing skill and progression, that everything, as when in the show ring, we get a little better and a little better, hopefully. But it's a process. You don't go into the show ring perfect and ready the first time you show. If you think back to the first time you showed a horse, think about how much different you are now, and then appreciate that whole process. And all of that is part of respecting the game, but especially always trying your best. I remember once I was at a horse show, and a young lady was running barrels, and she hit the first barrel, which happens, okay, 5-second penalty. And then she proceeded to start laughing with her friends at the sidelines and hit every barrel. Now, that was disrespectful. It was obvious that she was doing it, but it was disrespectful to the people that worked at the horse show, to the volunteers that had to reset those barrels. It made her look like not a good competitor, and it was unsportsmanlike. So try your best the entire way through, even if things go poorly. Do understand what brand you're riding for. And what I mean by that is, if you're at a 4-H event, then the focus on that event and what you're doing is youth development. So the focus should be on kids and their ability to proceed with horses and progress with horses or other animals. That's the philosophy of that program. I don't really see a difference in sportsmanship in this definition if you're at a quarter horse show or at a reining show, but it's a little different philosophy. So do be clear about what it is, the organization that you're riding with or under at that particular horse show, and then respect that philosophy. But ultimately, at a 4-H event, we're about developing kids. We're not necessarily making horse trainers. We're not necessarily, they may become horse trainers, and a lot of people who get started in 4-H do. But what we're about is helping kids develop the ability to successfully compete, successfully navigate the world as they develop through projects like horses. So horses are a tool in this case to develop life skills. And that's what we do in 4-H, and that's what needs to be the focus at 4-H level horse shows. So we also need to have respect for the others that are involved in the event, and there are many others. So that could include judges, show managers, parents, trainers, coaches, leaders, whoever is involved. Being disrespectful to others might boost the ratings on TV, but not in real life. If you're disrespectful to these people, that is not going to improve your lot in the long run necessarily. So that may mean developing some emotional control abilities and going back to those life skills. Helping kids develop the ability to control their emotions, venting or their frustration or their stress at appropriate times and locations is something that we can model and help kids learn that will serve them not just at horse shows, but going forward. But we really, really, really need to focus on having respect for others involved. And especially from a volunteer perspective, if you're a volunteer at an event and you're outside in the sun all day, opening a gate or handing out ribbons or whatever, there is no benefit to anyone to be disrespectful to those folks who are helping make that horse show happen. So all of this is really easy to say, but how do we develop it? So the long and the short of it is, be a good role model, no matter who you are. So whether you're a youth involved in competing or whether you're an adult who's there to be supportive, be a good role model. I understand it gets frustrating. We put so much time and effort and money into showing horses that when things don't go well, we really sometimes get emotional. Trust me, I've been there. I've done that. But what I've learned is that it's better to go somewhere private to vent. You can go back to your trailer. I have a little squishy stress horse thing that I got at a conference somewhere. I might squish the stress horse. I might throw it across the trailer if things are really frustrating, but I'm doing it in private. I give myself 5 or 10 minutes to be frustrated, and then I move on and figure out how I'm going to make it better next time. I don't take it out on my horse. I don't take it out on my family. I don't take it out on my friends. Congratulate other people and accept congratulations graciously. I remember a time once when a young lady was in a really deep, tough class, and she wound up getting a 4th place ribbon, which in that class, I mean, it was a big class, 25 or 30. 4th was not a bad thing, but she chucked her ribbon in the trash on her way out of the show ring. That was not accepting congratulations graciously, nor was it an example of good sportsmanship. So we don't accept that. Don't ignore other people. Now, I say generally there, and I'll explain what I mean there. Personally, when I'm getting ready to go in the show ring, I need about a 10 or 15 minute window to kind of get my head together, to get my game face on, to figure out where my horse is at. And so I'm probably not going to be the most social person during that period. So I may ignore somebody. If they say hi to me, I usually try to say hi back, but that might be as far as it goes. And that's okay. I think we have to understand, again, that this is a competitive situation. And so there are things that athletes or show exhibitors do when they're getting ready. But once the event is over, again, another 10 or 15 minutes to either be really happy or not be really happy, as the case may be, in private, and then move on. But from a program development perspective, or from running a program perspective, the other thing I would say is that once we give awards to kids at a horse show, if they've won them, we don't take them away because somebody made a mistake. So unless it becomes clear that someone cheated or broke a rule, that's different. But if we make an accident, or we accidentally read the awards wrong or something like that, as the people that are running the horse show, we don't take those awards away. We either we give them again. We have extras back in the hopper, but I've seen some really bad situations developed when those kinds of mistakes were made. So emphasize good sportsmanship at all times and in all situations. That means before the horse show. This kind of thought process requires practice 6 months before the horse show. This might be the kinds of programs that you do start talking about long before we get to the event. Regularly using words like respect and sportsmanship, and bringing that into your work meetings or your practice meetings or your training sessions with your horse. Asking kids, were you being respectful to your horse there, or weren't you? Were you being fair in your training then, or weren't you? And same with adults. Just keeping in mind that being competitive is actually serious fun. And what I mean by that is, I mean, like I said, I love competition. I think it's fun to do that and to be made a little bit better, or learn that I need to work on an area every time. But it's serious fun. And so, like we said with the barrel horse exhibitor, bad sportsmanship could be being too serious or not being serious enough. So finding that happy medium in the middle where we can enjoy our horse shows, but also be serious when the time comes. And focusing on the relationship between good sportsmanship and success, I think, is really important as adults when we're working with kids, or as young people too. To me, a victory, and I like this quote, it's my quote, so I guess I can just say it. A victory without respect, dignity, and honor, and good animal treatment really doesn't mean much. So if you cheat, if you have to hurt your animal extensively to get the job done, or the look you think is desired, if you feel like spurring and jerking and all of that stuff that we see in the show pen sometimes is what's going to give you the win, then I don't really have a lot of respect for you. period, even if you win. So I would have a whole lot more respect for a horse and an exhibitor that treated their horse with respect and treated other people with respect, and managed to win. To me, that's a much bigger challenge than taking shortcuts and treating your horse poorly and that kind of thing. And unfortunately, if you're one of those people who cheats or treats an animal poorly or treats other people poorly and still wins, they'll remember you, but not for the reasons that you think. It won't be because you won that they'll remember you. They'll remember that you're a jerk. So I guess you just have to think about if that's how you want to be remembered. A few other things we can do maybe at the club level would be to establish customs and traditions that emphasize good sportsmanship. So that could be things like barn signs, sportsmanship awards. At the Michigan State 4-H Horse Show, we have a program called Reward the Good, and we buy some extra prizes to give kids when we see them treating or demonstrating good sportsmanship. So that way, we recognize it. They get an award for it. Of course, it usually goes on the social medias, so Facebook or Instagram or whatever. But we think it's just as important that people get recognized and rewarded for the good things they do in animal treatment and treating one another as it is to get a prize for winning in the show ring. So we try to praise hard work just as much as ribbons, because that actually will serve you long after the horse show. So from an adult perspective, be specific about how you want exhibitors to treat each other, opponents, officials, and horses, and then have some clear guidelines for how you're going to handle unsportsmanlike behavior, and then share them. And typically you only have to do it once. To be honest, when I said in the very beginning that I understand this, I was a real brat when I was showing horses. And unfortunately, looking back, there was at one time when I was being a real brat as a 14-year-old, my mom said, if you don't straighten up, we're going to pack up the horse and go home. And I was a brat one more time, and we packed up the horse and went home. And we never had to do that again because she knew how much I wanted to show, and I learned quickly because she followed through on what she said she was going to do. So you may only have to do it once, depending on the young person. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was working on a clinic, and there was a young lady who was being disrespectful to her horse and everyone around. And I dismissed her from the clinic. And I said, you can come back when you cool off a little bit and settle down a little bit. And she did. And I didn't get ugly. I didn't get mad. I just said, you need to leave and come back when you're ready to work a little, to work and to calm down. And she did. And hopefully that will have a long-term positive effect on her, I hope. The other thing you can do after the horse show or at the club level is talk about specific things, incidents of good sportsmanship and maybe bad that you've seen. And as adults, we can ask kids questions to promote them thinking about what they saw or what they think, and do emphasize the fun aspects of horse showing. It doesn't have to be all difficult. So just to conclude, because I know I'm right at 7:30. Look at me. So great character can certainly be developed from showing horses, but what we want to do is be intentional about what we're doing, reward the behaviors we want, not unlike horse training. Recognize that showing is sometimes a stressful and emotional time, but that's not an excuse for poor behavior. So we're always in an educational environment, so we're going to do the best we can to help model that behavior and teach that behavior, and not accept stress as an excuse for poor behavior. The same thing is true with adults that are involved in these activities. Sometimes adults get just as emotional as kids do. But again, we can develop character in our adult volunteers by being intentional, rewarding the behaviors you want, honor all kids under the rules that you have at the time. So as many as possible. We try not to make rules to exclude kids or to try to keep them from being part of the program. But again, recognizing that running a horse show or having kids at a horse show can be stressful for adults too, but that is not an excuse for poor behavior either. So with that, I'm going to try to show a video that I really like that was created by a private college. And there are some horses in it, so don't worry. But let me make sure I can get to it. And Brittany, is it still showing okay? Okay.
Each day, we commit ourselves to being the very best student athletes that we can be, whether we are training our bodies or our minds.
It is on fields and courts that we pursue excellence that help us realize our goals.
We believe that playing within a competitive environment enhances opportunities for our personal growth and development.
Through wins and losses, we learn to persevere and battle back with determination.
It is our responsibility to respect the game, our opponents, and officials while pursuing victory with passion and pride.
We strive to achieve this mission and always represent the college, our program, and ourselves with integrity and honor.
The positive energy and support of our fans creates an atmosphere that encourages us to compete at the highest level.
It is our objective to protect the nest while building spirit and enthusiasm among our fans.
The challenges and lessons we learn on the field and in the classroom prepare us to succeed in the real world and in life.
We play hard, but with dignity and class to obtain the highest rewards.
It is in the greatest moments of obstacles and success created on the field of play that will last a lifetime in our minds.
Sportsmanship,
Respect,
and playing within the rules of the game.
It's our responsibility.
It's our responsibility.
it's our responsibility. One, two, three.
Oh, I lost my screen. There we go. All right. So hopefully that video, every time I watch it, it kind of inspires me to be a better human and be a better sport when I get to the horse show. So hopefully the same is true for you. And I guess that's the end of the talk. Brittany, I don't know if we had any questions or anything, but if there are any, I will take them.